Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Diane and my passion is painting and creating nature-inspired watercolours in my studio, which are easy for you to do too. I share all my paintings with you on YouTube, and on our website dianeanton.com you can find free downloadable sketches for all the videos to help you make the most of your painting journey. And if you'd like a little bit more, we also have channel memberships with loads of perks for you to enjoy. So welcome on board. Click subscribe and turn on notifications, and let's learn to paint watercolour. Hi everyone, Diane here, welcome to my studio. Hope everyone's well and looking forward to this, which I certainly am. Just recently I was given by Paul Rubens this set of 36 colours, their fourth generation set of watercolours for artists as opposed to students, I think. And they're very proud of these colours, and they think that they are different, better, superior, I don't know, and we will find out when we test them. Yes, there's lots of things that I could say about this, and I'm just going to basically witter on, I think. I've been doing some notes. I'm going to do this review in my normal way, which is a little bit rambly. But I do put a lot of work into the background for all of this. So things I say, I try to be able to justify what I'm saying by having done some looking into pigments and so on and so forth. There's a very good pigment page on the internet. I'm just going to look it up to tell you. If you're interested at all in what pigments are actually put into paint in order to make it go the color it is. And I have never, in the whole time that I've been painting for so very, very long, I've never really paid very much attention to this. And now I'm feeling really silly because I should have done. And the website is called Art is Creation, I believe. That's the name of the domain is www.artiscreation.com. And on there, you can easily look up all the different pigment numbers. Hang on, I'll show you. Let's take it off my stand here. I'll just show you. This is the home page, and what you do is to find out what pigment is what. When you see on the tube a number like PR9 or something, that means pigment red, PR, pigment red. So you go to red, look up red pigments, and you'll see all the numbers here. So if you see PR 176, you look there, and you'll find that that's benzimidazolone carmine, which is very useful, but it does tell you then that it's used to make alizarin crimson and these other colours, and it tells you also the initials standing for the manufacturer. So carmine, Daniel Smith, that's DS, and WN is Winsor & Newton. So Winsor & Newton's permanent alizarin crimson contains PR 176 or benzimidazolone carmine. And it tells over this side, it tells you about the colour strength and light fastness and all of those sorts of things. So you can know what it is you're using. Also mentions if there's anything poisonous there, or if it's if it fades, and loads and loads of stuff. And there's an absolute mine of information here if you want to go into it. And when people say, oh yes, these paints are wonderful, then you want to see, because you might not agree and you might agree. And on the whole, overall, just briefly to say, this is a very good set of paints, very nice to use, and very worth the money, much cheaper than Winsor & Newton if you were to buy 36 tubes. But there are some anomalies and some interesting things, and some pluses and some minuses, and it wouldn't be fair. But saying that, of course, what might be a minus to me might be a plus to somebody else. So I'm going to try and say these things with as neutral with neutral sort of emphasis, no emphasis on either side, so to speak. Just need a slurp of coffee. I'm winding down. My battery's going flat. Right. I want to get out of the way a couple of niggles first, because it's best to say the things you don't like first. This little leaflet that comes with it, I don't think that they have done a good job of it, because the few colours here, there are several colours in this chart that aren't in this set, and these are only labelled with the number of the paint, not with the name. So it's a real faff to have to go backwards and forwards looking at the paint and trying to find out which number corresponds to which colour. So that's irritating, to say the least. Also, it's too small. I can't actually... Early in the morning, I cannot read this at all. My eyes just will not work for me. And I can imagine and I wear glasses, there must be lots of people who wouldn't be able to read this at all, ever. And I certainly can't read it in the morning early. I can read it at the moment, but I wouldn't be able to read it in the morning early. I couldn't this morning, and tonight I won't be able to either when my eyes are tired. So I think they could have done us a favour and gone up a notch or two on the size here. It's exceedingly mean. But who am I to say? I've already written to them and told them, and they said tough, basically, tough. So this comes in a cardboard box. I'm not going to say anything about that. It's kind of matte black cardboard. I haven't yet used these paints, but the box is already starting to look worse for wear, but that's me. I'm such a klutz. Inside, you have a piece of foam to stop them from falling around, and then we have this is a sort of what do you call it? It feels like velvet or something. This is velvet. The minute I open any of these tubes, it will be contaminated. There's no question about that. That's obviously going to happen. But that's, again, just me. Looking at this, my first impression is, wow, that's a lot of blues. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total pure blues, and 1, 2, 3, 4 dark blues, and this is a sort of purple. This is dioxazine violet. So altogether 10 blue shades. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 greens. 1 brown. 1 black. No white. And then up here we've got Naples yellow, which has got 3 pigments in it. And we've got lemon yellow, cadmium yellow. Then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 oranges. Cadmium red light is halfway between orange and red. That's cadmium red light. Then we've got burnt sienna, and then we've got cadmium red, and then we've got some quinacridone reds. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reds there. Well, if you count those two, 8. The first thing that hit me when I opened this was the lack of earth colours. I've been painting an awful long time, and for about the first 50 of those years, I was using what we used to call the traditional palette, which is 12 colours, which basically you can use to paint anything. You can mix anything and you can make anything happen. It just takes a little bit more skill than if you just use colours straight out the tube. But this was the way I was taught to paint, and so I thought I would compare. Just out of interest, we've got on the traditional palette, we have 5 earth colours: yellow ochre, raw sienna, burnt sienna, raw umber, and burnt umber. So looking at those, yellow ochre is a very light brown. Raw sienna is also light brown, but also more yellowish in a way than yellow ochre. Burnt sienna is a very nice rusty colour. Raw umber is a light dark brown, if you see what I mean, and burnt umber is a dark brown. Funnily enough, they're all made from the same pigment for Winsor & Newton. They're all made from a colour called PBR7, which is basically iron oxide. So they're all made from different oxides of iron, depending on how you make the chemical, depending on what its based on, you're going to get slightly different colours. So you've got 4 oxides there, earth colours, very cheap to make and very useful in the palette though, because, for example, burnt sienna and ultramarine, which is one of the basic colours, makes a very lovely grey and is beautiful in the sky. So for clouds and so on and so forth. So it's surprising what colours you can mix from these basic colours. And that's one of them, a lovely soft grey blue, which is perfect for very many things, from raw sienna and ultramarine. Surprise. Then we've got obviously ultramarine and cobalt blue are the two, the warm and the cool blues, and also phthalo blue, which is a modern colour, which is very strong. It used to be called Prussian blue, and then they developed a way of doing it more modern, and started to call it, because it's phthalocyanine, they started to call it phthalo blue. That's very important for making vivid greens. You can mix any shade of green using that as the base pretty much. And then alizarin crimson, which is the rose red colour that we all love, gives a nice pink. Cadmium red is a more yellowish red, but very, very strong and semi-opaque. Cadmium yellow and lemon yellow, and those are the two yellows, one warm and one cool, which you mix with the blues to give you an infinite range of greens. So this is the basic palette, and not all of it is present in here. There is no phthalo blue at all in here, which is strange because it's not an expensive colour and it goes a long way, but I can't find it. Even though there are all 10 of these, there isn't. There is indanthrone blue, which is not the same at all, but is interesting because Daniel Smith, I think, introduced this. I'm not sure. I don't know as much as Lindsay Wyrich, so I'm not quite sure where this one came from, but I have heard good and bad about that. I've heard that it tends to dry a bit shiny or something like that anyway. So yes, so we haven't got any of the earths. There's no phthalo blue. There's no alizarin crimson. Instead, you've got this here, which is made with PV19, which is quinacridone rose, which is a nice colour. But funnily, it has to be said, also, we've got quinacridone violet, which isn't violet at all. It's also made from the same pigment, right? It's made from PV19, 2 colours in the same, nothing else in there except PV19. And those 2 colours, when you swatch them out, they come out very, very similar. I know that because I've watched other people's videos to find out before I started this. Nobody actually, I don't think, has mentioned that, but that's kind of strange. So there's no alizarin crimson. There's no cadmium red as such. There's just cadmium red light. And then what's the other thing? The lemon yellow is made from a different pigment from the Winsor & Newton one. So we'll see what that looks like. There's a lot of yellows here. There's a lot of yellows. I suppose that sort of matches with, you can make about 1 million different greens with this set of paints, I would think. Okay, so that's comparing the traditional with this. My extras, the ones that I bring into my basic palette from time to time, used to be these. So Naples yellow, which is here, cadmium orange, which is here, Winsor violet, which is the same as quinacridone violet or dioxazine violet. So that's down here. Sap green, which is here. Permanent rose, which is the same as quinacridone rose, PV19. Quinacridone gold is not here. That's not surprising. Everybody ought to have a tube of quinacridone gold because, in my opinion, it replaces all of these. You don't need any of that. And then there's black and there's no white here. But I would always have a tube of white in my set because sometimes you want to dilute a colour down with white. I'm going to be very naughty and say white has a place in your palette. If you haven't got white, you can try using, what's it called? Naples yellow, which is mostly white mixed with brown. So that's a sort of very light brown white, brownish white, creamy colour, something like that. So there we are. That's a quick rundown of what's in this box. If you're still with me, what we're going to do now is we're going to put them out on my palette, and then we're going to paint a little bit of each one and look and see how they look on paper. Okay, so next thing. A lot of people, when they swatch out paints and they come to them in tubes, what they do is they transfer the tube paint into half pans like this. And then they let them dry and then they paint from there. That seems to be the fashion at the moment. Personally, that's not my style. I don't like doing that. So what I do, what I've always done, and what I'm going to show you how to do is using a large palette like this. So we're going to forget all about this fiddly idea, because you know what, at the end of the day, when you get to be our age, life's too short to be doing with all of that. You want to paint from pans, buy pans. You want to paint from tubes, buy tubes. And then put the tube paints out on a palette like a real artist, which is what you can do with these Paul Rubens paints. Now, this is just a white plastic tray. They're not expensive normally. You can get them in dollar stores and things like that. It doesn't have to be anything special. Or you could even just use a piece of board or, I don't know, anything white and big that's not porous. And what I do is I have one here that has been used before. Obviously, you don't have to do this. And if you haven't got much space, then boxes of paints are obviously the way to go. Tins of paints. We used to call them tins of paints or paint sets or sketching boxes or pochard boxes or whatever. I don't know. People used to call them all sorts of things. But let's put that up a little bit. This is what it looks like once it's laid out. I've got them labelled around the outside edge, and this is a slightly smaller number of colours. This is my, as I said, pretty much my expanded basic palette. I haven't got very much paint out because I don't use this very often now. I've been using the Kuretake set for ages because it's easier, but that's another story. Anyway, so what we're going to do now is I've labelled this because I thought you wouldn't be wanting to watch me doing that because it's boring. But we're going to start up here with Naples yellow, and I'm going to put a little bit of each one out, going round one after the other, and then we're going to do some swatching. So let's put a little blob of Naples yellow. Right, so lemon yellow, which is, as it says on here, somewhere in the most minute writing, PY3. Naples yellow, I didn't mention. It's got 3 pigments in it. Not sure how well the phone is going to work. PW6, PY53 and PBR24. So that's white, yellow and brown mixed together. So you could make your own. If you don't have it or don't want to buy it, you can make it with white, yellow and brown. Everyone needs a tube of white. This is cadmium yellow deep. Pardon? No, beg your pardon. Cadmium yellow light, which has got PY35 in it. 20 of these 36 are single pigment paints. So just over half. Cadmium yellow medium, PY35. Didn't I just say that was PY35? This tube is not full. Had to squeeze a lot harder to get that to come out. That's up to there. Cadmium colours are more expensive, so they may have only half filled that tube for that reason. Indian yellow. This is PY33. That's enthusiastic. Wants to come out. Indian yellow, that looks like an orange to me. We'll see what that looks like when it's painted. Earth yellow, now that's the same pigment as yellow ochre. So this is basically yellow ochre, and it looks like yellow ochre. Yellow ochre is a useful colour for landscape painting. Transparent yellow. This one's got PY150 in it. That should be, yes, it always looks like a brown, but when you actually use it, you'll find that that goes to a bright, transparent yellow, which is useful for florals. Transparent colours are good for florals in general. This one, come on phone, focus. This is, I'm having a lot of trouble with focus at the moment. This is, I can't read that, chromium orange. That would be good for flowers as well, and I should imagine you could probably make some quite nice colour mixes with that. And this is transparent orange. Carrying on, we've got cadmium red light here. So let's pop this one down here. And yes, that looks pretty much like cadmium red. Nothing surprising there. And then this one is burnt sienna, which is an earth colour, as we mentioned before, made from PBR7. That one is quite thick. Took a little bit more pressure to get that to come out. Don't think that's a real problem though. This is Pyrrole Ruby Red. Pyrrole Ruby Red. Much runnier than the brown. And this is Quinacridone Rose, which I think is a substitute for alizarin crimson, and it looks like it. And these two, Pyrrole Red and Quinacridone, would be the equivalent of my cadmium red medium and alizarin crimson. So, you know, they've got different names, but they're basically the same is what I'm trying to say. This is Perylene Maroon, and I think that looks like it's going to be quite a brownish red, that one. We'll see. Not sure. Maroon in France is brown. Marron means chestnut sort of kind of colour. This is Venetian red, which is a somewhat opaque light brown, I think, usually. Indian red, similarly. Often people say, oh, you don't need both of those. And I think that is often true, but in this set, they're two different colours. This one's obviously going to be a bit darker. And here we have Quinacridone Maroon. And then this one next to it, which is Quinacridone Violet, is the one that's the same pigment as Quinacridone Rose. So can't wait to try that out. So we'll see about that. I wonder if I can get away with putting that in the middle there. Yes, okay, we'll do that then. So the next one is Cobalt Turquoise. Here we have, what have we got there? Cobalt Turquoise. I can't read it. 29 or 28 or something like that. There we are, sorry about that. Cobalt Turquoise. And then we've got Cobalt Blue Light. Oh, I've missed one out. Okay, so that's Cobalt Blue Light. Ugh. Right, Cobalt. I like Cobalt Blue. Cobalt Blue is one of my favourite colours for using for the sky. I prefer it actually to ultramarine these days. And this is Transparent Turquoise, which goes there. And you'll see how that looks like black, doesn't it? One of the advantages of using this method, I'm going to try not to make that touch, is that you can see what colour you're working with. This is azure or azure blue. And yes, we'll talk about that in a minute. Once you put water on them, you can see what they are. Whereas if you use those little pans, when they're dry or dark, full, you can't see what you're working with. This has made a noise. As I opened that, it kind of bubbled inside, and it can't wait to get out. See that? It's coming out the tube. It's alive. Ugh. My God, I didn't even squeeze it. Oh, that's full of air. Never mind. This was, I've been waiting for this set to come. They promised it to me before Christmas, I think. But they said they wouldn't send it until they released it on the English market. I don't know quite why that is, because I'm not in England. I don't know if they realise that. I'm actually in France, which has got nothing to do with England, even less now we're not in the EU. But they said, no, you can't have it till we've released the version for England. We're up to Brilliant Blue Violet now. And I'm not going to say anything about the quality of the paint that's coming to us, as opposed to the quality that you've got in America. You can't say anything like that. Dioxazine Violet is that one. And then the next one is Indan Throne. Indigo. I'm going to put, I put it there. I haven't left myself enough space there. It doesn't matter. I'll manage. And then I'm going to miss out the black. I'm not going to put the black in there. Indigo, and then I went up to here. Mint green. Sap green, which is the traditional sap green colour. And then we've got Oriental green, which is going to be a slightly bluish hue, I think. Looks a bit like phthalo green, that one does. Quite probably is. Olive green. Good colour for leaves and trees and stuff. And olive green deep, which doesn't look at all like olive green to me. When it's painted, you can't tell there in the mass like that. This is, what's this? Cobalt Turquoise Dark. That's interesting. What's going to be, doesn't want to come out. Urgh. Right, that's one of the stiffer ones. The cobalts are all a little bit weird, aren't they? Either it's half empty or else it's thick, really thick. It must have some filler in it. And this is brown umber, brown umber. Right. I knew despite my best efforts I would end up with paint all over my hands, but that can be washed off. So that's what I'm going to go and do now. Okay, so I have prepared earlier this chart, so to speak. This is done on a piece of Bockingford paper. This is a block, so it'll stay nice and flat while I'm painting it. And it's conveniently 36 centimetres by 26 centimetres. 36 centimetres divides nicely into 12 3-centimetre sections. So I've put one row of 12, another row and another row to match the ones in the box of paints like this. The only thing that I've changed is that I've changed the order slightly, and you'll see, but it won't matter anyway what happens. And I've written along the top, and you might want to do something like this too with a new set of paints, whether it's this one or any other. Along the top I've written the name of the pigment, underneath it the codes for the different contents, the different pigments within the paint. And so there's 3 rows like that. And then this black line there is to show the opacity or the see-throughness of the paint. So if they're transparent, then you should be able to see the black perfectly clearly. And if they're slightly opaque, then none of them will be completely opaque, because watercolours, as opposed to gouache, are never completely opaque. But some of them, like Naples Yellow, are a little bit opaque-ish, depending on the brand, actually. So we'll get started with this. It might take some time, but I'm going to use a flat brush for this just because it's a bit stiffer and I'll be able to get the paint on a little bit more quickly, I think. If I have to change as I go along, then I'll change. But this is a small flat, size 10 draw well brush. Now, these paints have been sitting here while I had lunch, which is about 2 hours since I went, no, hour and a half or thereabouts since I went in to make lunch. And they have developed a skin on the top as they've been sitting and drying, which is what you want if you're doing this in half pans. But if you're doing it this way, you don't really want that. So if I were beginning a painting with this palette now, I would spray all of the paints to soften them up. And we'll start off with Naples Yellow. And I'm just softening that up and picking some up. And then I'm going to put it up here quite thick, showing the opacity. And then after having got that far down, I'm going to pick up a bit more water and a bit more water, and then just paint it out a little bit so you can see, for future reference, you can see what that goes to once it's diluted. So that one's got 3 pigments in it. It's got PW6, which is white, and then it's got a yellow and a brown in it to get to that colour. So then next one is lemon yellow. So we give that a good smush round, and I need a little bit more water. So that's more or less full strength at the top there. And then we're going to paint it out a little bit as we come down. So that's a nice clean yellow that will mix up with blues. And gosh, there's enough blues in this set. Mix up with your blues to make some nice greens if you don't want to use the ready mix greens. And now this is cadmium yellow, which will be a little bit more opaque than the lemon yellow, which should be transparent. And you can see that there, if you compare those two, there is a little bit more coverage of the black. I wouldn't say it was terribly opaque though, but it has a slight opacity. And then that paints out to something like that. And now we've got cadmium yellow medium, which is this one. And this should be a slightly warmer yellow. By warmer, I mean it has a sort of more of a reddish or orangey tinge to it. And you can see that that is true. Again, that's a very useful colour for making greens, as well as obviously painting daffodils and primroses and things like that. And lemons, strangely. So that's quite nice. And now we have Indian yellow, which is actually orange. In my book anyway. So then we have Indian yellow, 1 pigment. This is single pigment, single pigment, single pigment, single pigment. No need for any. The good thing about pigment, if it's a single pigment, you have a better chance when you make a mixture. You have a better chance of making a clean colour that doesn't go muddy. You know, it's the bugbear of all watercolorists is to avoid having their paintings go muddy, which can happen when you mix a lot of different colours together. So assuming you only mix 2 different out of the tube pigments at any one time. You see this one's gone a bit solid, but it's okay. You can add water to slacken it off. Earth yellow, which is basically, I think we said before, this is yellow ochre. What we know as yellow ochre. Slightly opaque, absolutely no doubt about that. That is yellow ochre as we know it. No doubt about that. Not a particularly strong, but a very useful colour. All of these yellows, when you mix them with greens, will make blues will make greens. And this one has got a lot of dispersal in that. You see how that ran down as I as I put it on the paper. I'll just dry that. Yes, whereas these cadmium colours, I think it's because the pigment, well, I'm guessing that it's because they don't move if it's got a heavier particle. Now this is transparent yellow, which, as I said before, it looks brown in the mass, but when you add water to it, you get a yellow. And this is a very popular colour in floral painting. It's quite a natural yellow, not quite so acidic as this, and a bit more realistic looking. So again, another very good one for, you know, your famous daffodil and so on, and your laburnum and whatever. That is a nice colour, actually. I like that one. It's been in my palette for a long time. Not that particular one, but transparent yellow is always very useful. It has lots of different names. You might come across it with a different name. So it's PY150. If you find it with any other name, it's still probably more or less the same. Now this is chrome orange. And that's chromium orange. That is also very transparent, isn't it? There's not a lot of body to that. I don't know if I can make that a bit darker. Yeah, it's still very transparent. I'm going to paint that one out. This kind of orange plus blue will give you a greyish green, I think, you'll probably find, which is quite handy. It's nice to be able to paint greyish-green leaves on plants when you're doing modern watercolour. This is transparent orange. Oh no, that's a very nice colour. Look at that. I'm not going to argue with that. That looks like quinacridone orange. I'll have to look that up, PO71, and find out what that is. I didn't check that one. That's a nice orange. Looks like oranges. Let me just paint that one down. It'll be interesting to see whether these, in fact I should do a test to see how these dry, whether they dry the same colour as they are when they go on or whether they fade back a lot. Now this is cadmium red light, which should be slightly opaque. But, when you mix this with an opaque green, you're going to get something close to black, which is always useful. And that's the opacity that does that. Excuse me. Okay, well that's no doubt about that. That's cadmium red light. Okay, I'm coming along. Now let's have a look at the burnt sienna. We all know what burnt sienna looks like. It's a reddish brown. A very, very useful colour. Useful for things like roofs of houses. And as I think I mentioned before, makes a very nice grey if you mix it with ultramarine. Very useful for clouds, rather than using just, you know, a pre-mixed grey. Now this is a colour I'm not familiar with. I don't know whether this has another name, but it's Pyrrole Red. I think I might have this in Old Holland as Old Holland Red. And that's a semi-opaque, or slightly less than completely transparent. It's a nice clean colour. Fire engine red, I think I probably would call that. Well, no, maybe it's not. Perhaps it's got, it seems to have some nice pinks in it down there. So maybe that would be a surprising choice for painting flowers. I think the pale pink there would be very useful. Now we're on to quinacridone rose, which I'm hoping is going to be a substitute for alizarin crimson, because alizarin crimson isn't in this set. And this is quinacridone rose is made from the pigment PV19, which is quinacridone violet. And I don't know what that's got to do with violet. It doesn't have much blue in it, does it? Anyway, so there we are. That's nice. And then we've got Perylene Maroon here. Which I said earlier that maroon was a brownish colour in France. Marron means like chestnut. And you can see that there is a brownish tinge to this red. But that looks like, it makes you want to immediately start painting flowers when you start swatching something like this. So there's a tip. When you feel uninspired, just get your paints out and make stripes of colours until you feel you can't stand it any longer and you're going to have to paint something properly. Now this is Venetian red, which is, generally speaking, in my experience anyway. Where's that gone then? Oh, there it is, yes. Duh. Opaque, I was going to say. And yes, you can see that, can't you? This is an opaque colour. I've got quite a few tubes and pans of this colour. And it's very similar to Indian red and English red, come to that. It sort of goes around the world, this colour. They're all very, very similar. And I hardly ever use it. I don't know why. I'm sure some people do use it all the time, I expect. But you don't really need Venetian red and Indian red unless the Indian red is different. And in this case, their Indian red, Paul Rubens' Indian red, is different. It's like painting with liquid chocolate. Look at that. Well, that is the most opaquest watercolour paint I've ever seen. I think it's even more opaque than black. That's interesting. So we'll just pull that down a bit. Okay, well, there's a time and a place for everything. I'm sure that'll come in handy. A lot of these colours are really, really nice when they're diluted and you see other colours coming through, and you can see that, the Art Nouveau set with all its pale colours and everything, they're just achieved by diluting the paint down. In the case of the Kuretake set, I think mostly with white, but water will do the same job. Now, as that's starting to dry, you can see that the black line is beginning to appear. So that means that it is going to dry lighter than it goes on, which is what we expect. Now we are on to quinacridone maroon, PV42. If you're in the least bit interested in the pigment colours numbers and the sort of chemistry on a very simplified level behind them, I do recommend that you have a look at that page I mentioned earlier. I'll put a link in the description below the video, and you can. Well, it's quite addictive actually. I'd never done it before, never looked, never thought about it, just painted, and I imagine it's quite possible to get completely sidetracked into doing nothing but swatching paints for years. I'm not going to do that. But this has got a nice amount of dispersal going on there on the quinacridone maroon. Quinacridone is a lovely colour, isn't it? Whatever it is, yellow, gold, purple, maroon, whatever. There's some wonderful range of very amenable colours. That's got PV42. Now this one, quinacridone violet, I'm curious about this because It's got the same pigment in it as quinacridone rose, but this is actually coming out different. I don't know how they do that. It says it's the same pigment, but it's a different colour. So something goes on in those chemistry labs, you know, that we don't know about, and they don't tell us. And somebody out there is saying, yeah, but we don't need to know. All we need to know is how to paint. And that's true, but I think knowing what paint is made of is probably useful. And here's me saying this, and I've painted for years and years and never knew a thing. I still don't, but everyone can learn. Never too late to learn, as they say. Cobalt turquoise. These paints are drying up on the palette. Taking a while to get them going. Wake up, guys. That's a pretty blue, isn't it? And I'm going to let that one come down the bottom. You can see that being handy. The nice thing is these colours are attractive. They're not too garish, and there's not a lot of earth colour out there. Now this is transparent turquoise, which is PB16, which, unless I'm mistaken, is it or isn't it? No, PB16. What is PB16? Tamsin? Can you tell me? Because that looks like phthalo blue. Yeah. Is it? Phthalo blue greenish. That's phthalo blue greenish. So there we are, that's phthalo blue, and they're calling it transparent turquoise instead of phthalo blue. So I said earlier that there was no phthalo blue here, but I was wrong. It's just incognito. It's not a very strong phthalo blue though, that one. It's been weakened in some way, but that makes it perhaps a little bit more useful, because phthalo blue is one of those ones everyone goes, be careful with that colour. It'll ruin your life. It can be very powerful, and you should, in the books, in the older books, it always says, this is a wonderful colour, but please never use it undiluted, unmixed, never. Never. No phthalo blue should ever hit your paper unadulterated, because it looks so artificial, and there's nothing in nature that's that colour. Or this colour, or that colour, or that colour, or that colour. But anyway, we've all got immune to colour now, and we expect everything to be much brighter than we did in the olden days. For better or worse. That's cobalt blue, that one is. PB28. Next one is azure hue. That sounds like the beginning of a sentence. Azure hue. I know your name, Hugh. This is azure hue, which also looks like phthalo blue. PB 15.3, I believe, is phthalo blue. Just waiting for confirmation from the oracle.
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
You what? What? 15.3.
Phthalo blue.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Copper phthalo cyanide.
Cyanide?
Copper phthalo.
Okay, that's phthalo blue too. Yes, there's a lot of phthalo going on around here. Okay, that's a little bit more powerful than that one, which is phthalo turquoise. And we are now up to Berlin blue. Don't tell me this is going to be another phthalo blue. There's me saying there's no phthalo blue. Well, yeah, but there's 5 of them. Oh, good grief, what's this? That's That's like navy blue. That's quite nice. Some people would call that indigo. PB27. You go and look that up.
Prussian blue.
Prussian blue, there we go. That was what phthalo blue used to be called. So here we have phthalo blue, not only incognito, but with a pseudonym. Okay, now we're to French blue. They should call this Napoleon blue, shouldn't they? Napoleon blue, otherwise known as French blue, otherwise known as ultramarine. I have known people in the past who were so in love with this colour that they wanted to paint everything, including the sky, in neat ultramarine out of the tube. It's a kind of addiction. Nothing wrong with that as far as blueness goes. Nice clean blue. As I said before, it makes a nice grey when you mix it with burnt sienna. Okay, now we're going down here to brilliant blue violet, which is here. Oh, that makes me think of pansies. That would be a good one for pansies, wouldn't it? Yes, very nice. When we do a painting, or after I've done a few paintings with this, I'll be able to say something about the tinting strength. In other words, how much paint you actually need in order to achieve a good intensity of colour. And that's one of the things that I really like about the Kuretake paints, because they very easily give you a lot of strength. And this one would seem to be similar. This is dioxazine violet, which has also been known to be called Windsor violet and things like that. That's a very strong purple colour, isn't it? And now we have the exciting Indanthrone blue. I can't say that without thinking Daniel Smith. I don't know why. It's kind of linked in my brain. I think first time I came across that, I remember who it was that was using it. It was Angela Fair. She was using Indanthrone blue. And I thought, I'd never heard of that one before. That was new to me at that point. I think it was her. Sorry, Angela, if I'm taking your name in vain, but I thought it was you. Indanthrone blue. I'm not sure how you're supposed to pronounce that. And now we're coming to indigo. Which is, well, it looks nice and dark as it goes on wet. It's a little bit opaque, I think. There have been times when I've painted with a lot of indigo. It's a good shadow colour, quite helpful when it comes to plant shadow, because being a nice colour when it goes over green, it just darkens things down. Because, of course, shadows are never black or grey, are they? They're always just a colour. Now we're going to zoom up here to May Green. She lives next door. Don't know why they call it May Green. Perhaps because in May all the leaves are this colour in China, perhaps. So that's a not particularly realistic shade of green, but I could imagine that might come in handy especially for some of the whimsical types of things that we do a lot of. Now we are into sap green, which I think you could say this might be sap green light. That's quite a pale. One thing that is a little bit concerning about these paints is that they're not open, as far as I know at the moment. They still aren't open stock, which means that if you use up a tube, then you've used up a tube and you can't buy just one tube, I don't think, as far as I know. I did look, can't see anything. I suppose I should write to them and ask them. And I think Lindsay Wyrick, the other day, I heard her saying that around about Christmas time. I don't know if things have changed. She was saying they ought to do open stock because then they would have there'd be quite a market for their paints. Now this is Oriental green, as they call it. Need a bit more water there, which is phthalo green, good old phthalo. Can't go far without bumping into a phthalo. Now that's a very synthetic looking colour, and that would be a colour that if I was teaching anyone to paint, I would say it's best not to use this colour unadulterated. This colour needs to be partnered up with something so that it doesn't sit on your paper looking really unreal. Now this is olive green. I might even go as far as to say that could be considered olive green light. Yes. And then there's another colour right next to it called olive green dark, which has probably got phthalo green in it. Oh yes, so it does. Nice colour. Nice colour. It makes me immediately want to mix it with purple to see what will happen. Yes. And then cobalt turquoise, deep. Oh, this looks as if it's a little bit opaque. And it is. That's a subtle colour. Also not particularly realistic. Doesn't look like many leaves that I've seen, but with a little bit of yellow in there. And then finally, brown umber, which I don't know what that is, but it looks like it might be similar to burnt umber or even close to black. This would be useful. Mind you, it's got 3 pigments in it. It's got 2 blues and a black to get us to this brown colour. So there we are, and then finally, I didn't put any out, but I can find a tube. Ran out of space over there, didn't I? And don't use a lot of black. And here is the black. And it's not opaque. I don't think it's as opaque as the Indian red, which I think is the most opaque colour on the chart. So there we are. Black, which is, just to be fair, I'll add a bit more. There we are. So there we are, 36 colours from Paul Rubens. So there we are. There's all our colours, all nicely swatched out like that. And that was fun. I've never done that before. Couldn't you tell? Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint some of these colours onto another sheet of this paper, and with the idea in mind of creating some colourful tulips or tulipy-like ideas. And the reason for doing that is because we've got all of these reds and yellows and blues and greens, and I think one of the most colourful things I can think of off the top of my head at the moment is a bed of municipal tulips. So let's, I've got around 14 here, and I'm going to just pick up some pigment and slap it on in a slapdash kind of way, and then be terribly wasteful and clean my brush and pick up another red and put that next to it like that, and ditto. And I'm going to do them 3 at a time, okay? This is, which is this one? This is quinacridone maroon. So having done 3, I will do more because this is great fun. I'm going to try out the greens, and we'll start with olive green, and we'll just put in a stem and some leaves. And we'll let that run because that's ideal. And then to put a little bit more colour into the leaf, let's go for some dark olive. Let me just drop a little bit of that in there and let that do its thing. Maybe put a bit more there. Okay, and then we'll do the dark olive on this one. And let's put in there some, what's this one? Oriental green, just as a bit of a enlivening it a little bit. This way we can see what some of the blends look like when they hit one another. And we put the olive, sorry, not olive, what did they call it? Oriental green. Ooh, that's got a tendency to run, hasn't it? And I think I might do the leaves in a more realistic colour there, so sap green. And when you're doing something like this, you don't want to be trying too hard, but on the other hand, you might not necessarily want that green creeping all the way up your tulip. So just say, get down, get back, boy. And we had this colour there, wasn't it? It was that one. It'd be a good poppy colour, I think. Okay, so remember, this is just a test. This is not meant to be art, in case you thought it might be. Right, this is quinacridone violet. And we'll put that in. And maybe we'll add a bit more down the bottom and let that do its thing. Maybe we'll add a little bit of reddish. And I've tried all of those ones, haven't I? Those I'm not going to because they've got nothing to do with it. Okay, so let's wash that out. And let's have a yellow, transparent yellow tulip. Let's try that. Yeah, and let's go for, I'm going to be very conventional and try olive green for the leaves. And for this one, perhaps the same. Okay, you see how artificial and strange this colour looks here This was Oriental Green, and that's a colour I think I would probably be inclined to beware of. I'm not going to, I'm going to cover that up. I'm not going to be using that one unless I've got it well diluted into something else, I think. And let's put some more yellows. Let's have cadmium over here, perhaps. Cadmium yellow. Cadmium tends to be a little bit more heavy-bodied than transparent yellow. You can see how transparent yellow is. I don't know, it has a kind of granulating, I think, thing going on there. It looks quite pretty. The cadmium makes me think I want to add some orangey shades to it, so I'm popping in some Indian yellow. Let me see how that goes, and then we'll do one in Indian yellow only. Perhaps we'll put a couple of those in the background down here, maybe. Now I call that orange, I don't call that yellow. And the green stems. And perhaps we can have an orange. Can you get orange tulips? Can't see why not. Okay, so, oh, that's a very strong red. Perhaps we should put some of that in here. That's lovely, isn't it? Perhaps we'll put a bit more of that over here too. Perhaps I'll add some to one of these yellow ones. Not that one, but this one. Yes, that needs it, doesn't it? So here we are then. That's interesting. And got plenty of colours in there. I think I might want to put some more of these reds down the bottom, down here in the background. And some Indian red mixed with that red. That's nice. So we've just discovered that, which one was it? This one mixed with that Indian yellow mixed with quinacridone makes a very nice orange. See that? And that's the benefit of using this kind of a tray here, because you can play around. You can say, oh, I've got this Indian yellow and I want to add a bit of that and see what happens. And you can see what you're doing. Whereas when you're using half pans, which are really meant to be used when you're out traveling or in the field doing plein air, you're much more limited. And the idea of, I'm going to say something completely, what's the word? Incorrect. No. I'm going to say something, and that is that the idea of the little tins, these things, originally was that you would take it with you when you went outside to sketch. So you would pick up your little rucksack and your box of paints and a brush and a little bottle of water, tiny, and you would take a folding stool and you would go out. You would go out and sit somewhere by the side of a river and you would sketch what you could see. And then you would go home, probably it would have water all over it, but then you would sit down in your studio or your dining room table, and then you would refer to the sketch that you had just made and do a proper painting using your proper set of paints and your proper palette and all the rest of it. So that's why that was done, and people had a limited number of paints and a limited number of mixing opportunities, and that was that. Now it seems like everybody seems to think that you have to put your paints in small half-pound size containers. And I'm not quite sure where that came from. But anyway, I just thought you might like to hear a little bit about, if you're very new to watercolour, that you might not know that. Those of you who are not new will know that already. And you can still choose to do it, but I always think myself that whatever you choose to do, you should choose in full knowledge of what the alternatives are, don't you? So if you choose to paint from a little tin, then you've made that choice and you've got your reasons. But you shouldn't do it because you think that's the only way to do it. Okay, so the question is, should you invest in a set of Paul Rubens paints? They're intended for people who are making the shift from student quality to artist quality, with a very affordable price point for a set which offers you high pigment density, high transparency, and many single pigments amongst all the different colours that they offer. Big range of colours, but we're talking here about the 36 set. And of course, the ability to use them to make clean mixes and to paint wet in wet and in layers goes without saying. The only possible drawback to this set is that they aren't available open stock. So when your tubes are empty, you have to buy a whole new set or switch to another brand or paint something completely different, which could be annoying. But in fact, that isn't a disadvantage if you think of these as a stepping stone from students to artists. As the Paul Rubens colours run out, replace them with the top quality artist tubes from Winsor & Newton, Daniel Smith, or whoever you choose from the top level producers. And you make a painless shift to full-blown artist paints. So if you are an improver on the point of wanting to upgrade from students to artist quality, this could be the ideal set. And at only $80 for 36 colours, you can afford to add a tube or two of the missing earth colours, and a big tube of white, and a tube of quinacridone gold, because nobody can paint without quinacridone gold. Do I recommend this Paul Rubens set? Yes. If you're a fan like me of tubes rather than pans, yes. If you're making that shift upwards in quality, and yes, if you paint mostly florals and whimsical art, which will love the bright clean colours of these paints. So there's something to think about. And I'll let you go now and ponder the Paul Rubens paints. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.